So welcome to the next class, everyone. And of course someone wants to come in right now. I think we've now determined this is week 5. It feels like week 6 to me. First of all, before we get started, does anybody have any questions lingering from the week? I know we'll have more than probably more questions than Adam wants later on, but definitely if anybody has any questions, please jump in.
I had a real hard time with not the top-down market, but the bottom-up market. And just like, I'll be honest, like doing all that TAM stuff was, I almost felt like it was completely over my head. I sat there and I grinded it out. I did. I'm a creative person and not a numbers person. So it requires an insane amount of energy in order for me to do something like that. And I'm not sure if anybody else felt that way with it. But I feel like the top down was easier than addressing the bottom up.
No, I felt the same way, Terry.
Okay, it's not just me, because I was like, okay, I need to walk away. I need to walk away.
Whereas we hit the breaking point. Oh no.
Yeah, Whereas my husband, who he has a background in business, he understands all that stuff, and he's the type of person you would hire to run those types of numbers and figure it out.
Yep. Well, I think we could definitely say that, as we think about this book, Disciplined Entrepreneurship, and the course we're going through, quite honestly, this is what trips me up. I've been through up to about this stage, and I'm right where you are, Terry. Like, I always stop and I'm like, oh my God, here come the numbers. And, again, many of you may not know this, but I pursued an MBA briefly, and I got halfway through accounting and I'm like, oh, this is just not me.
I'm glad that's not just me then. Okay.
It is, it is useful for understanding. We talk about this deep understanding of knowing your customers, but also as we're moving through the next couple of weeks, really knowing your beachhead market, just knowing more about what your business is going to be. And unfortunately, numbers have to come into play. So I can totally feel your pain, but hopefully our guest tonight, we're putting all the weight on his shoulders now.
Yeah.
Great.
Amanda, do you want to do the introduction? Sorry, I haven't had a chance to eat. Like, this is just me saying, I would really appreciate 5 minutes to eat.
I'm eating oatmeal right now. I don't know why. Don't feel bad.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say too, I'm sure Adam has a lot of lessons learned to share from more like tech-based and then kind of more traditional businesses. But I think the funny thing of reading that chapter is like, yes, you have to have a good idea of like what size to make sure that you have a market that's attainable and a business is sustainable, but then there are all these caveats as well that like when you're figuring it out, when you're looking at TAM, that, you have to take all these other things into consideration, like how quickly you can get market share and profitability. So I don't know. We'll see what Adam has to say. So I will introduce Adam. I'm probably, since you didn't send a bio, I'm going to make it up as I go along.
That's fine. Whatever you say is perfect.
But Adam, I probably met Adam about 2 or 3 years ago at this point, when he was running an accelerator program called G Beta. That's part of a generator accelerator program they have a couple hubs, one in Madison, one in Minneapolis, and one in Milwaukee, I believe, 3 M's, or that's where it started. And G Beta was specifically for more health tech companies. So that's how I originally met Adam a few years ago. And now he's off on his own startup, which I believe you left G Beta about a year ago, maybe at this point, that has, it's focused in the dentistry space, his startup, to help children and probably adults, but I think mainly children, get more comfortable with dentist visits, with a character called Mimi, the hippo. I get emails from Mimi all the time, so I'm well aware of Mimi. But yeah, I think Adam has a lot of great insight to share. Has worked with a lot of companies, so we're definitely grateful to have his expertise with us this evening.
Well, thanks for having me. Maybe I'll just start by just briefly filling in some of the gaps. Not that there are many there, just so you guys have a better understanding of kind of the full background that I have. So, like Amanda said, I was a managing director at a startup accelerator called Generator. When I first started there, we were in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and now they're rapidly expanding to probably close to 10 plus states and probably 24 cities, doing programs that are either equity-based or the free model all over the place. A lot of that's been done since I've moved on. I left Generator at the end of 2019, which feels like an eternity ago. My job was simple. It's to do stuff like Jamie and Amanda, which is work with entrepreneurs, both local, but also nationally or internationally, to help them with their companies scale and grow, get investment, and continue down the path of becoming the next Amazon or whatever they want it to be. It doesn't have to be Amazon, of course, the next big idea in whatever sector that they want to play in. Before that, my background is more on the healthcare side. So I worked for companies like Nestle Healthcare, St. Jude Medical, and a local company called Wuxi AppTech in Mendota Heights. I also did a couple of research fellowships at the U of M, one in medical device innovation and another in neuromodulation. And part of where the startup came from was the work in the neuromodulation space. You know, I don't know how familiar the group is with, you know, medical devices, but if you hear the word neuromodulation, you think of pacing the brain or the spinal cord with electricity. Our version of neuromodulation is more of a central nervous system modulation using cognitive and sensory stimulation. A fancy way of saying we use sight, touch, sound, maybe in the future, taste, smell, to help kids prepare for upcoming clinical experiences in a positive or neutral manner, so they aren't fearful of their upcoming visit. And I'm happy to kind of take you through my pitch deck too, to kind of give you an idea of how we think of markets from our sector, because it's a very important thing when you're going out talking to potential investors or potential employees, or, you know, whoever the stakeholder is that you're trying to convince that you have a good thing going for you. So I'm here to talk about markets. I kind of will leave it up to you guys. Maybe Amanda or Jamie can kind of tell me. I'm happy to go through my deck first and then jump into the market section deep dive off of that, or go the other way around. I talk pretty fast, so I should be able to cover both within the hour that you've given me. So what do you think? Do you think it'd be easier for the group to understand if I go through an example first, or go through the high level info and then go through an example?
I'm thinking maybe high level and then example.
Okay, sounds good. I'll share my screen and we can get started. All right. Oh, not share. Okay. So, you know, one factor that determines how large a company can grow is the overall size of their target market. And I don't know if this group already has companies, or they're thinking about companies, or what the case is where you are in your process, but feel free to interrupt me at any time. I don't usually look at the chat box, so just kind of unmute yourself and just jump in. And I'm happy to pause and answer your question before you forget it. I'd rather answer it on the fly if it's there. So what do we mean by that? We'll go through an example here just because I think it's easier to walk through it stepwise. So, you know, this is an example we used when I worked at Generator, mainly because we never had a company in this space. So it's easy for us to just kind of go out there and use it whenever we want. So let's say you are a product company in the pet space. More specifically, you sell shampoo to the most high performance group of pet owners, the ones that are doing like the kennel club shows or whatnot. You want to figure out what your target market is. And you've said, well, you know, we want to go for the people that spend the most money on their animals and have the most high upkeep animals that are out there. So we target poodle owners who compete in the poodle club or kennel club competitions annually or quarterly or whatever the case may be. That's our target market. Okay, cool. Let's go to Google and find out how many people that is and how many pets that equates to. sounds like there's 576 people that fit that mold, which makes sense because, you know, how many people are out there actually competing in this sector? Probably not that many. So that's kind of the beachhead, bottom up, narrowest part of the funnel in terms of who you're going after. When you do the bottom up total addressable market, we went with the approach of every month you're going to spend $10 on this product, and then you multiply that by 12, and then you get 120, and you multiply that by 576 to get a total addressable market for that specific crowd of being $70,000 per year. And that's what your beachhead market is. So, you know, when you're thinking about top down, I think this is the one that you guys are talking about was a lot easier. The approach would be every dog owner that has to wash their pets. What would that equal? Well, I think there's about, and these numbers are a little dated, but let's just say 60 million people. And of that, they have, let's just say from there, we can safely assume that 50 million of them are going to be buying shampoo or taking their dogs to someone that's going to shampoo for them, and they're spending the same amount of money. Well, then all of a sudden our top down number is going to be astronomically larger by many, many multiples, $7.2 billion instead of $69,000. So basically, when you compare it that way, those are two huge numbers. And so I think the easy approach that most people would take is the bigger number is better, right? We want to be able to tell investors or potential employees, look how big our opportunity is. And so that's where naturally everyone goes. And I'll just kind of weave in some of my own learnings from interviewing, you know, a couple thousand startups over the course of 3 years at Generator. Anytime we would find a founder that would go to the whatever $1 billion number right away, we'd have to spend more time than we want actually getting down to that bottom up number by the end of that conversation, because we needed to know where they were starting when the things were the hardest. The number on the far right is when things are easy. It's when you're the Apple of the world or when you're the Amazon of the world. At that point, sure, yeah, you can tell us it's $70 billion a year in pet shampoo. But when you're first starting out, in the first 5, maybe even 10 years of existence, it's a pipe dream to say you're going to get to this. Now, I mean, I say that, and you guys can probably Google and prove me wrong on 1 or 2 or 3, maybe a couple outliers. But for the most part, most founders, most companies are going to be looking for their 1 or 2 beachhead markets. Now, this is kind of a narrow example in the sense that to say that there's only 576 people, you can probably find 2 or 3 adjacent bottom-up analyses that you can work with. But the whole point is when you do this type of analysis, you're automatically forcing yourself to think about strategies to engage with those specific people. And so it's putting you, it's holding you accountable to say, I've done my homework on my demographics that I need to go after. So, you know, this is just kind of thinking through what you've probably already thought. The poodle market itself isn't very large, so it's not very venture backable. And when I say venture backable, what I mean is going after institutional investors, not just friends and family, but, you know, going to a venture capital fund or PE group and saying, I need X hundreds of thousands, or if not millions of dollars, because, you know, for every dollar you give me, I can turn that into $10 worth of value, but I need that initial dollar to do it. So if you're building a startup to target all the US dog owners, you should still start by targeting a smaller subset, because that's going to give you the unit economics necessary to say, look, we did it once and we can repeat it for bulldogs, we can repeat it for terriers, we can repeat it for golden retrievers, and we can repeat it for not just the US, but also for outside of the US. So once you have that first building block, it lets you tell that story for the subsequent building blocks you're going to stack on top of it. So why do we think that bottom up is much better than top down? It's because, first of all, it's showing your investors or the people that you're presenting to that you're not lazy. And as a forcing function, it makes you become very smart about your area of expertise or whatever your product is or services that you're providing. If you don't do the bottom up, you're going to have holes in your story and you're going to get tripped up very quickly. You know, if someone says to me, there's 50 million pets out there in the US that have a home, I would say, okay, break it down. What's the age group of the owners? Where's the states? You know, on average, how much money do those people spend on their pets? Of that money, how much of it's on products that are related to their hygiene, you know, and of that hygiene money, how much of that's used for shampoo? You can't get down to that granularity unless you actually do the bottom up. So you don't ever want to be set in a position where you don't have that information. So it's just good to do. And, you know, it's not meant to be your assumption around how much the market you can expect to capture, because no one ever expects you to capture 100% of the market. I think if everything goes the way you want it to, most of the ultra successful companies that you see out there, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the you know, Walmarts, they're trying to command 50 to 70% of market share, and that means they pretty much are the first place competitor in the space. But for them to get 100% would be next to a pipe dream, because there's always going to be competition that, you know, vultures some of your piece of the pie. So no startup ever captures 100% of the market. So it's pretty ignorant for someone to go out and say, this is what our company is going after. You can say that's what the total market cap is, but here's where we start, and here's where we are preparing to carve out our industry's, you know, foothold. So, and I mean, just circling back to our kind of ridiculous example of poodle shampoo, you know, the total addressable market of 69,000 isn't anything that anyone's going to write home about. It might be good enough for one individual to have a lifestyle business or a Main Street business, but certainly not something you'd walk out the door trying to find institutional investor. Not saying that that's the only way to go, but even if you're trying to raise money from a bank or some friends and family, you're going to want to still be able to tell that story from the granular level. But then when you start pivoting it towards the conversation of going after a venture capital group or a private equity group, they're going to want to see the M word, or the more likely the B word, for you get them to, you know, look up from their smartphone and actually give you some time and attention. So it's just important to make sure that you are doing that homework, and it can be frustrating, but I promise you that research never, you know, is a waste of time. Even if it feels like a dead end, it's now new information that you know about your sector that you might not have known in the past. And it's better to find out on your own than have someone else on the other side of the table be the first to tell you, because quite honestly, if you're stuck in that position, there's a good chance that you've probably lost that person as someone that finds you credible. And I don't mean that to scare anybody, but it's just, you know, if it's something that you're going to put your life into, you want to make sure you know every dollar and unit economic surrounding that sector to the best of your abilities. And if you don't know, you always say, you know, I'd have to go back and look. I'll get back to you within the day. So some ways to think about how do you, you know, segment the size of the opportunity. You know, a lot of people start with one particular product. I think it's important to brainstorm and whiteboard whether or not you can turn it into a platform. So the best example is probably going to be, I won't use Uber. I'll use Tesla. You know, they started out by being a electric vehicle company, and they built a high performance sports model car that was over $100,000 to buy one. And then, you know, slowly over time, as they started getting market share and, you know, the resources to do it, they started to build out their platform. So they went downstream and said they were going to build a more affordable version, and then an even more affordable version. And then soon they said, you know what, we're also going to do solar power, solar panels, and we're also going to do batteries. And so they took their entry, which is their way to get viral entry into a customer base. And then from there, they decided to kind of steal the playbook from Apple, I would say. You know, Apple started with the iPod. I mean, obviously they did computers back in the 80s and 90s, but their big viral way in was becoming the #1 music playback device back in the late 1990s and then in the 2000s. And once they got in, they had these loyal customers that were tied to iTunes and their software, and all of a sudden they now had a gateway to say, hey, you know, if you buy our phone and our laptop and our desktops, everything's connected. It's pretty easy. And now all of a sudden you got this situation where I'm one of them. I can't leave because all my apps are paid for on the iTunes store. All my files are connected on the cloud. You know, and so figuring out how do you make that viral platform play, not saying that you need to do it from day one, but having that roadmap to tell that story about why your market opportunity isn't just that one quote unquote widget or one software service. It's actually, the vision is something much grander than that, which then leads into the potential of your opportunity, right? If you look at any of the really strong companies that are out there, they're finding ways to build on their products and interweave things where it makes it hard for you to pull one facet out of there and still be able to operate like you normally would. So it's kind of like, how do you build a low-key monopoly in someone's life in terms of solving their pain points? And then can you articulate the pathway? I think this is the most important part. You know, as entrepreneurs and founders, we can get very excited very quickly and want to tell people the whole vision and the mission and the dream, but you need to start with, you know, the steps in the right order, because if you try to tell them you're going to take over this particular industry from the very first minute of the conversation, chances are that person on the other side of the table isn't going to know how you're going to get there or what the heck you're saying. And that has a lot to do with your beachhead market. If you narrow yourself to your beachhead market, you're going to do a great job of making sure that you don't start going off the rails and saying things that you shouldn't be saying, not at that initial conversation anyway. So I'll stop there. That's the short and dirty version of market size from the bottom up. Are there questions that I can, you know, jump into? I'm happy to answer for pretty much any industry at any stage. Kind of seen it all or heard it all.
I think there's a question in the chat asking, would you say that in creating a platform, is that why some people move from providing a service to selling a product or vice versa?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know every company why they pivot or switch. Some of them might have already had that in their vision from the very beginning. Others might have just figured out over the course of time that they can't do one or the other. What I will say is the companies that successfully pivot can pivot because they know there's an actual pain point that they're addressing. They were just packaging it in the wrong manner at the current time. So they realized, you know, people really care about this. People really are frustrated by it or excited by it, whatever the emotion is that they're triggering. But we just assume the wrong way of delivering the service or the product that they needed. So I think when you look at a company that's doing that, I bet like what they're doing or the secret sauce or the magic behind it hasn't changed, other than just, you know, now instead of X, it's Y, but it's the same underlying pain point that they're addressing. But I would guess if you made me put a number to it, I would say more of them are pivoting because what they thought they had wasn't right than they already had it in their master plan. Because like, let's be honest, I think everyone that started their company didn't know where it was going to be, you know, 10 years down the road when it's successful. Let's go with, you know, the guys that started Airbnb. They pitched a completely different company to the Y Combinator team before they got in. And the only reason they got in was because they were like, oh, these guys are really crafty marketers. Let's bring them in and they'll figure something else out. I can't remember what their initial pitch was, but I mean, they completely pivoted from what it was, but they had the money to have the time to figure that stuff out. You know, it'd be interesting to ask Jeff Bezos where he started when he was selling just books online, if he really thought it was going to be this global empire that does online storefronts, but also, you know, cloud computing and whatever else they got. You know, they're building video games. You know, they got pretty much everything under the sun. Google has Alphabet because they want to pretty much do everything and anything in any sector, because they know that once they can build it, they can then use their infrastructure to power it. So I would say 9 out of 10 even are probably fumbling along till they actually figure out the best package to present to the people that want to buy their product. So if you're frustrated and you think you think you can't go anywhere with it, don't let it dishearten you, because there's probably, for every story of success, they probably all come with a lot of major pivots along the way. Let me see. I can open up chat myself.
So I guess a question I have, this always trips me up, is, in the book they're talking about like all this research and all this thought you have to put into either, calculating TAM in general, whichever way you do it. That always leads me to like over analyzing everything and looking to like 150 different sources and being like, do I have to subscribe to databases to get this information? What's a good strategy, sort of a minimal viable TAM that people could use? Because I think that's what really gets people tripped up the most is just over analyzing their markets.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone have an example of a market that I can just try to just go with off the top of my head? Otherwise, I'll use my own, but that's kind of boring. So.
I know, just going off what Jamie said, that's something that I'm doing right now, is overanalyzing the education system in that field. I'm trying to build an after-school program, a nonprofit that promotes after-school programs, where I'm overanalyzing the millions upon millions of different possibilities of how this thing could look and how this thing could shape up, and realize multiple different ways. Obviously there's so many different types of kids, so many different types of parents, and there's so many different types of schools. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to pinpoint my beachhead market. Who is that? And how I approach them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I think I got it's an after school program. My guess would be K through 12, or some subset of K through 12. What I'll say is the first place you want to start is where you're most passionate about should be your beachhead market, if you can make it that. So if you particularly enjoy high school students as a demographic, or middle school or elementary, I think narrowing that down for yourself is the best place to start. On the other side of the coin, what groups are naturally the easiest ones for you to speak with? You always want to follow the path of least resistance. And so maybe for you, it's schools that are in suburban or urban or rural areas. Figuring out the groups that are most naturally, drawn to you, what you're doing, might be telling you right in front of your face the sector that you should be going for. So let's just say hypothetically, the most interested people are the groups in let's go with suburban settings of populations of 20,000 or less in a city, and a school size of 1,000 kids, or 500 kids. Let's go with 500 kids. And of those kids, 20% of those kids need to find some form of extracurricular activity. You can take that number and then probably safely just find basic Google searched metrics around it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Obviously it'd be fantastic if you could pay for a giant research article that costs, a couple grand to very much so validate your numbers, but back of napkin math isn't going to be turned away, at least in the early conversations. If someone were to tell me in a pitch, there's 200,000 kids that fit this demographic, this, and this, I probably wouldn't argue with them on that front. In due diligence, I might have an associate of mine double check it. But, if you're going to tell me in the US there's 20,000 schools, and of those 20,000 schools, 5,000 of them are in this subset, I'd be like, great, cool. So I guess my point is, it doesn't need to, and this is kind of going back to Jamie's thing too, it doesn't need to be scholarly reviewed data. It needs to be Google verifiable data. So if I can get there by 2 or 3 Google searches to the same numbers you got to, then I'm probably going to run with what you're saying as a starting point. Because, you know, obviously if I were to be hearing your pitch, I might have my laptop open. And as you're telling me these numbers, I might be Googling those things on my laptop just to see if it's close enough. So, you know, you just want to make sure it's something that an 8th grader could verify, you know, when they go and open their laptop to do it as their own homework. So in terms of the analysis paralysis, I would say the first thing you want to do is start with the demographic that you think you would have the most fun working with, working for, building products around. So, you know, I don't know if that helps, but it shouldn't be something where you try to force it because you're going to need to start somewhere. Because I'll tell you, as you go, you're going to have to cross them off your list. You know, really good marketing agencies, what you're paying for when you work with them is they're giving you a profile. They're going out and surveying, recruiting, interviewing different people in different groups. They're actually building profiles out and then finding people that fit their profile and asking them, is this a product you would use? Or is this a product you wouldn't use? And over time, they're narrowing down for you. Okay, your product is for teachers that are between the ages of 25 and 40 because they're more tech adaptable or tech willing, and they want to use something for that space. And as a result of that, you're going to want to go after teachers in these areas because they hire younger teachers because they need to, and they have kids that fit your demographic. So you're kind of a detective trying to figure out what that looks like for your business model. I know I kind of rambled there, but I mean, the point of it is just like, it's not as hard as it sounds. And you're gonna run into some dead ends, but every time you run into a dead end means you're that much closer to finding the actual path forward. So that's all important. But I would say come up with a thesis and run with it and see if it actually has traction. And if it doesn't, don't waste too much time, you know, trying to make something of it. Try something else, because you can always come back to something that you tried early on after you learn something and revisit it. So it's very iterative in terms of how you get to your perfect customer in the very beginning. You know, for my startup, we're not there yet. You know, we've approached different groups at different sizes and different ages and different regions, and it's always a little bit of a learning experience, and we're continuing to build out that profile. Other questions? Otherwise, I can just go through my example too. All right. Well, I'll just jump through our deck because you'll kind of get an idea of our story and, you know, where we're taking it and what the vision is and what the market size is. Hopefully, anyway, if I built this out properly, you'll be able to piece together in your head how big the opportunity is by the time I'm done. That's the whole goal, anyway. Okay. So our company's Yonder. My co-founder and I started this company going on 4 years ago. We were both researchers at the U of M as innovation fellows, and she and I were both placed on a team focused on pediatric patients, or well, I guess kids in general. I wouldn't call them patients, but focused on healthcare. And so Yonder's goal is to build healthy oral habits that last, starting with the at-home care and the clinical care of going to the dentist. So kids hate to brush, kids hate to floss, and kids hate going to the dentist. And you might think, well, that's an overgeneralization, but studies show that about 30 to 50% of kids have some form of fear or anxiety of the clinical setting, and it's even more so in the dental setting. And this might be a picture that you've seen if you have kids, or if you were one of these kids. In my case, I was one of these kids. In my co-founder's case, she's a pediatric ENT surgeon, so she sees kids like this all the time. It's a common thing. If you don't know what you're going into, you're going to be afraid of it or apprehensive, or maybe even more, maybe kicking, biting, screaming, clawing, spitting, whatever you want to call it, because you don't know what's going to happen. And the younger you are, the harder it is to sometimes understand those simple things. And so teaching good oral habits can be a battle. It's actually one of the most important things that a child deals with growing up. It's the #1 disease in children, cavities are. And 20% of kids between the age of 5 and 11 have at least one untreated cavity. And, you know, before the whole COVID thing, one of the stats that we thought was the most compelling reasons to tackle this is that 51 million school hours are lost each year due to dental related pain, where a kid stays home because their teeth hurt. So what's our magical solution? Kids love characters like Mickey Mouse or Elsa. It's been working for centuries, and kids love Mimi the Hippo. We engage through two channels. We do direct to families through social media and entertaining content on platforms like YouTube Kids and Instagram, and also through the dental office, where we provide a free app for kids to use at home when a parent signs up for a cleaning or a checkup visit for their child. And it's a very simple process. Whether it's the parents that request it or the dental office, we take pictures or video of the practice. It's submitted to us, and we build them a custom white labeled app that the dental office can now provide to families coming in before the visit. Consider it like to be like a 3D home tour of someone that's looking to buy a house, or looking at an Airbnb before you pick an Airbnb, except it's built for kids and it's fully interactive in the form of an app that a kid can control between the ages of 1 and 7. So what makes Mimi so magical? It was designed by kids for kids. We worked with well over 200 kids through interviews and A/B testing to design Mimi from head to toe. So this is our innovation team. Whether it's my little nephew Sven or my friends' kids Caroline and Louie, they help us build our character. And these are just a few of the kids that have worked with us over the last 4 years to design a character and a brand and a product that kids really love. And so we work directly with our end consumers to make sure that the product fits their needs and wants and necessities for their own health, experiences and the way they're going to go through life in the clinical setting. So our goal is to entertain these kids. And once you entertain them, you've engaged them. And once they're engaged, you can help them form habits that are educational for them. So whether it's brushing your teeth, flossing, eating right, getting exercise, being nice to others, sharing, these kids are ready to learn. You just need to put the right educational content in front of them. And our focus is oral health to start, and in the future, the sky's the limit. So what's our end result? We build lasting relationships with kids that last. Once these kids start to play with Mimi, they truly fall in love, looking for more content, more entertainment, more products that are to do with the dental practice itself, but more importantly for us, building a relationship with our character Mimi the Hippo, similar to how we had relationships growing up with Barney or kids these days with Peppa the Pig or anything like that. So we're following the playbook of Disney or Pixar. Get these kids to really fall in love with the character, and then once you do, you can do a lot with that relationship. So for us, we're at the intersection of retail and entertainment. Both are massive and growing. If you look at last year, Hasbro bought the owners of Peppa Pig for $4 billion in an all-cash deal. And if you look at kids as a brand themselves, an 8-year-old last year made $26 million on YouTube reviewing toys as just a YouTube influencer. So there's huge money and huge opportunities for us to tap into both of those markets and really build a brand and a character that people fall in love with, not for just 1 year, but for multiple years in a child's lifetime. So there's a huge market opportunity. For us, our vision is for Mimi the Hippo to be the Peppa Pig of healthcare. 4 million kids are born every year, which means 4 million kids are turning 2 every year in the US alone. And every one of those kids needs to be brushing twice a day for 2 minutes every time. And if they're not, they should be. And so for us, the two massive industries that we're tackling are the kids' toys industry, because we think we can build toys that have a mission-driven approach, which is a $27 billion industry in the US, and the pediatric oral health industry, products industry, which is about $1.2 billion and growing in the US. And so, how do we know this works? Parents tell us, staff tells us, dentists tell us. Over and over again, we get feedback from the people that are working with these kids and living with these kids that it's truly helping them and making life easier, not just for the kids, but for the practices, the staff, and for the parents themselves. So what was our aha moment? We have an opportunity to build a mission-driven brand for kids and parents. First tackling social media as a platform, and then things like YouTube Kids as another way to provide valuable content. And then lastly, in the future, to build branded products that we can then distribute through partnerships or through standalone pipelines. We're a team of 2, but we're surrounded by some great advisors, and we've got a well-rounded background and the network in place to help us get to the finish line. We've been bootstrapped to date. We've done everything with some small grants and our own money. We've got IP, patents, trademark, and we've got great data and paying customers. So with the magic of Mimi, we'll help kids all around the world. So that's kind of our deck. The only thing I'm missing there is actually the bottom-up approach, mainly because this was for a venture capital group out on the West Coast, and I think that's probably one market, and maybe even the East Coast, like New York, where you don't really need to worry about the bottom-up approach for a presentation because they want to see the big number right away. But in the Midwest, you should have a bottom-up for sure. So that's kind of our deck. And you can see there, if I were to go back to this slide here where it talks about the market size, I can tell you exactly what our market size would be. From the $1.2 billion pediatric oral health products market size, we would actually be targeting kids in the middle class where parents are spending on average $500 collectively on just random products that are brand associated a year. So for us, if there's 4 million kids, we're targeting a fraction of that 4 million times 500 as what we're trying to carve out of the market potential opportunity for our company. We would just ride the coattails of any toy company and find their quarterly or annual report and go to their business breakdown section, and we could pretty much just copy paste their target metrics that they're going after and say those are our same numbers. So it's a good hack for you guys to use, is find someone that's already doing something in your space that has public information, and you can probably get a good idea of what your market looks like too. And the $27 billion toy industry, that one's a little bit more of a future roadmap kind of thing. But the point is, I could have just said kids in general and probably blown this number out to 500 billion, but we at least broke it down to 2 subsets of that group, because this doesn't even include like kids entertainment or licensing opportunities or things of that nature either. Questions?
Adam, I have a question.
Sure.
This is Trikonda. So how did you decide that you're coming up with basically a pediatric app, but how did you relate that to the kids toy industry? I mean, I get it now that you went through the explanation, but in the beginning, I would not have said, okay, I'm designing an app so I can help kids handle the dentist. I wouldn't have associated that with a kids toy. I just want to know, or your industry, how did you come up with that?
Sure. That's feedback that we get time and time again from parents and friends and people that have interacted with our character, which is, we give these kids stickers that have our character on it at the end of the visit. And as a result of that, parents tell us, oh yeah, she wouldn't let me take that sticker off of her shirt, or we had to put the sticker on the fridge because they didn't want to lose it. And they would say, it'd be great if you could build a toothbrush or a doll or something that they can hold at the practice itself. So it's basically, the point about pivoting or adjusting, it's from, I guess, market feedback that we kind of come to that conclusion. But, the easier answer is our long-term vision is to be entertainment brand that provides health outcomes. And so for us, we envision a world where we actually don't charge dental offices 5 years down the road, and it's just our pipeline. We want to give this away for free to healthcare facilities, because the more kids that, see our character and fall in love with our character means that we have ways to actualize revenue from other streams where we don't need to worry about getting a business frugal doctor-owned practice of one to pay us a couple $1,000s a year. We'd gladly give it away to them to have access to their patients that are coming in twice a year to their practice. So
really your customer acquisition cost.
what is it right now?
No, but it really is. What your
Yeah,
model is, if
right.
you want to give it free, you're trying to acquire the customer, and
Correct.
that's what you're doing. So, yes.
Correct. Yeah. If you look at I kind of mentioned they bought Peppa Pig's brand for $4 billion plus an all cash deal. The reason why they did that was because Peppa Pig on average, just purely from licensing deals, does about $1 billion a year by letting different brands put their character on their products, whether it's a toothbrush or a book or a package of broccoli, whatever the case may be, because they know that in the industry for kids entertainment, they call it kid nag. Basically, they want kids to nag their parents to buy products. And so when they see a character on a certain product, they nag their parents to actually buy it. And 50% of buying decisions in my industry is determined by kids. It's not by the parents themselves. It's by the kids that are actually in the cart or adjacent to the cart, bothering the parents until they, bend the knee to the wants and desires of that child. So for us, right now we keep the lights on by doing a traditional SaaS model. But in the future, the roadmap that we would tell an investor is we want to give this away for free, because the moment we have 2,000 practices that provide this service means we have access to 2,000 times, 5,000 kids every year that are turning 2, 3, 4, or 5 years old and seeing our character for the first time.
And so did your model pivot from this app to this, and that was through your pitches to investors, and that was the suggestions from the investors, or no?
Well, I would say yes, in the sense that when we first started and said we have a software service company, investors didn't think the market opportunity was big enough, because for them, 156,000 dentists in the US isn't a big enough market when we're saying we're charging each dentist, $2,000 to $5,000 a year. For them, it wasn't venture backable. And so we quickly realized that either A, we need to say we're not just dentistry, but we're also primary care, we're also orthodontic, we're also first day of school, we're also different aspects of kids growing up, or we find something down the pipeline that does give us that opportunity, which would be floss, toothpaste, toothbrushes, content on YouTube, books about going to the dentist, you name it. There's a potential for us to even find ways to create custom packages where we're actually the marketing tool for dental offices, because we can provide everything that they need on the digital front to be their marketing arm towards parents and kids. So definitely comes from a pivot of, talking to a lot of people. It didn't start there. It definitely started as just, we're going to build this software service and then charge per dentist per month. And then from there, it scaled out.
So I did a quick calculation while you're talking. When you said $2,000 per year at a market of 158,000 offices, if you had 100% market penetration there, that's $312 million a year.
Yeah.
That was still not high enough for investors to consider that as a viable investment.
There's obviously, it's not easy to lump every investor into, so some would say yes, right? There's smaller groups now that are coming out that are more willing to invest in companies that are trying to have, in the venture backable world, they would call that a double or a single. Most VC funds are looking for $1 billion+ opportunities because they want home runs or grand slams or whatever the case you want to call it. I guess I'm going on baseball examples because they're trying to kick that off again. But that all being said, if it was a $300 million market opportunity, they're already discounting us for competition and people that won't buy it ever because they're just stuck in the status quo. So they're, whatever that top line number is, they're already going to discredit you, even if you are the first mover in it, even if you are the most successful. So they would probably say 300 million. Well, let's just say it's more like 200 million because there's no way you're going to get 100%. Right. So 200 million, and you want to raise how much money? Well, if it's a $200 million opportunity and we give you $2 million for a quarter of your company, and we think that a $200 million market opportunity means probably the best you're going to do when you sell is going to be 50 to 100 million. I don't know if they would think that's a good enough return on their investment. especially if they're trying to find returns on their investment that are 20, 30, 40x their initial capital invested. So that's kind of why they want the higher number to start with, because the way they do their math is if they invest in 100 companies, they're expecting, maybe not 100. If they invest in 20 companies, they're expecting one or two of those companies to bring back all the returns for all the companies, because 18 of them are going to fail. And those two are going to be what return all the money back to the initial investors. So they basically work under the premise of, we want grand slams or grand slam potential, because we know we're going to strike out 90% of the time, but 10% we're going to hit a grand slam. For them, yeah, unfortunately, 300 million might not be an appealing number, because they're also assuming that I won't be done in raising investment dollars after one round. So they're going to think, okay, they raised 2 million from us, and then 2 years later they raise another 2 million or 4 million, and then 2 years later they raise another 4 million or 8 million. Every time that happens, if they aren't following on, they're getting diluted out. And so for them, they need to ensure that whatever they're left with when that exit actually happens is truly worth what they think that it's worth when they come out of it. So for them, it's kind of they're trying to get the most that they can out of you, because they know that at the end of the rainbow, their 25% stake might only be 8% or something like that. And from that 8%, they want to make sure they're going to get their 20x return or 15x return. So that's why 300 million to them might not be that exciting. But angel investors, that's more than enough. And some funds, it's in their thesis. So it really comes down to doing the homework on the groups that you're talking to see what kind of story they want to hear.
I have a question for you, Adam, because I think we probably have a mix of people who are thinking about venture backable deals and people who are thinking of more kind of traditional businesses that are more, would be able to be bootstrapped and would be cash flow positive fairly rapidly. For those people who would be, you know, more cash flow positive and wouldn't need maybe beyond like friends and family,
Sure.
Do you have some advice for what kind of market opportunity they would be positive for them, where they can make a go no go decision about, did I select the right beachhead market, and does this have the potential to be successful, taking into account your expectations of what you want to get out of this business, if that makes sense?
Yeah. You know, that's a good question, because what I've seen these days, and I'll use the dental industry as an example, because it's pretty close to everything that I do these days. You know, the best example I have is a solo dentist that's been running a practice for 10 years or 15 years, and they've got a really good business, decides that either A, they're sick of running their own practice, or B, you know, usually one of two things happens. Either one, they want to retire, or two, they want to do more. And either way, they have to make the same kind of determination of, what do I do next? Because either A, they, you know, try to join forces with another group, but then, you know, what's the opportunity there? Do I join one other solo practice, or do I join a dental service organization, or do I merge with a group of 15 dentists across, you know, 15 different cities? Mainly because then they're trying to figure out, you know, economies of scale, you know, and the whole premise is like, you want to build value, because if you're just building, so if you provide just a service, the issue becomes, if you decide that you're done, you have two options. One is you just close down and someone else kind of just creeps into your territory and takes over, or you can try to, you know, extract some form of value out of that, because you've built it into a brand or a process that someone just can't come in and swoop up and take your market share. So I would say for someone that's in the more of the quote unquote Main Street business, it wouldn't be the worst thing to try to spend some time and brainstorm, what can I do to build a protective moat around my expertise or my product or my relationships, or, you know, whatever it may be, because at the end of the road, when it's time to exit because you're just done, you want to be able to get a little bit more out of that by getting acquired or, handing it off. And so I'm trying to think of a good example of what that would be. I think consulting agencies are the most easy example of that. There's plenty of really good consultants, but when those consultants decide they want to pack it in, they usually just let their book of business go out the door and just gets acquired by other people. But if there was a way to, create it where everything's systematic, where they're on your platform, you have a software that they have to use to get your services, and you have SOPs that, people can't just access and, carbon copy. When it's time to exit, you could say, hey, Deloitte, or hey, whoever else consults in my space, like, do you want to acquire our technology stack? Because now you'll just also get our customers as well. So if there's a way to be creative about building out those infrastructures now, I would definitely think about doing it, because that's going to make you a lot more, palatable to a PE group that might be looking to acquire assets in your sector. And I'm having a hard time thinking of examples outside just consulting, because that's probably the easiest one to think of. Because a lot of consultants are just tribal knowledge, but if there's a ways for you to turn your tribal knowledge into a platform that your clients use or utilize, and they don't want to ever leave it because it's the best thing ever, then you can sell that relationship to the next person that wants to buy it from you. I'm happy to kind of walk through someone's company if they have one, because it's probably easier to go through an actual real life example. But outside of that, I think it's always important to figure out ways to build intellectual property into what you're doing, even if you think it's just a Main Street business. There's always something you can do.
Other thoughts, other questions?
And you guys can pass along my email to anyone that wants to talk to me about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing that maybe to clarify a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to think about the stage everybody's in. It's very early. They're assessing markets. They're trying to put some numbers together. If you have sort of what I would term a lifestyle business, I mean, this is just my feeling, but you may want to, think about the costs involved with your business and what you want to get out of it. If you say, what I want to do is just build, something that sustains me, I think you can use some of these tools to see, is that market going to get you where you need to be? Almost like you're your own venture capitalist. But to your point, Adam, I think it's smart, always be looking for a way to create value in what you're doing, and trying to find a way to make it bigger, and not just, if you put out you do a good job over the next 20 years and you do a going out of business sale and everything's gone. So trying to find something that you can really leverage to make it happen. But